So this is the main project. It's actually, in fact, no, it's the mix project for the CUFFBUST trailer. Very little actually differs here from the main project. There's just a few tweaks that I did to the mix after everything was confirmed, given the go-ahead. And you can tell because it's full of all my cut markers and sync points. So, unlike a standard game trailer or film trailer in general, this is linear and kind of follows like a condensed storyline, as opposed to doing something where a lot of trailers do, where they'll kind of build a narrative that doesn't actually exist in the piece of media, but it works to create its own bit of mini drama for you and hook you in. So instead of that, this kind of follows the whole trailer like an action score. It's a bit more like a soundtrack, but with some trailer elements like big hits met, pretty hyped mix. But yeah, the whole trailer depicts a prison break. That's what CUFFBUST is all about. And because of that, we wanted to keep like this building drama throughout the whole thing. So you've got basically drama ramping up slowly towards the very end. It's got a comedic closer with the title card. There was quite a lot of importance placed on separating the teams that are in the game. Your Jailians are sort of split into two teams in this trailer, which has been marked on my project with like the purple and the green region markers. So doing that but keeping everything with like one clear narrative was quite important. So there's two slightly differing motifs and ideas that keep coming back and forth, but never feel too clunkily separate from each other. The tone of the trailer was to be serious, dramatic, energetic, but also like tongue-in-cheek. So the way that I decided to go about this was to kind of reference things like Mission Impossible, some sort of the gritty synths that you get in like Tenet, Payday, but then pairing that with the more light-hearted, like the very saturated and colourful visuals of the game itself. As you can see, if we just open this up a little bit, we have this green guy here. It's all very colourful, and you know, stylized, a little cartoonish. And yeah, after all the big drama, we end on this comedic title card where we go from this big hybrid orchestral into reggae, which was a very fun change to add in at the end. That was pretty nice change of pace for the project. So the first things to do was to basically hit all of the markers. So I went through the whole trailer, I watched it through, and yeah, we've got like naked. There's a soap incident in the trailer, as you can see here. Bomb defusal. I knew that I needed to hit that because it was not a defusal, even a bomb drop. This was going to be, you know, a big impact in the audio and the visuals. So, for instance, there's no point in me cluttering things by adding in big drums at the point of a bomb going off. You're not going to hear it. It's that surveillance room. Yeah, so it's just about marking all the different scenes. Things like going through doors, I always mark that because it's like a fluid way to change your scene, almost. We've got a CCTV, siren going off, that has its own sound effects. So I didn't want to add my own musical one to hype that. It should just pair in together with the mix. Again, team change here. So here we have time signatures being met. That's just where we have maybe a scene that doesn't quite meet the 4/4 that we're in and the tempo. So you just, you know, you ramp up the time signature, and that way you can maintain pace. Yeah, so all those are met. The big ones for me that immediately stood out, as well as some of the ones that I've noted, is entering the sewer system. So the sewer system, as you can see there, suddenly you have all this green, you have this very new colour shift, and that felt like a big development in the narrative of breaking through. You know, it's very Shawshank in that regard. You know, if once you're in the sewer systems, it feels like progress has been made, and so I wanted to hit that, and so I hit that with a key change. And then after that, we have being outside and getting into the helicopter, where I bring in another key change, and we have like the full instrumentation, like brass comes in. I had a guitar lead to mirror with that, and then we go into the reggae section, which is it's in here. We've got this audio file here. This audio file doesn't have the tempo change and the pitch shift. I did that in a separate project here because Reaper has some pretty handy stuff you can just do on the file there. And that just also kept things from being too cluttered. It wasn't going to mess with everything else that's in there. And I could just import it back, and also meant that I could send it separately to Gavin if he wanted to make his own changes afterwards. So if I just play through the trailer, I'll make this a little bit bigger. So you can see there, one of the motifs that I've actually set up that keeps coming back is, I think, here, which is predominantly, I think it's almost, if it might be entirely in the strings. Yeah, so it's this dun, 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 diddle, 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 diddle. And then that is constantly being juxtaposed with the other team, which have just hear this. Which, when it feeds into the next one, still works. They're clearly different, but they're not so different that when you're going back and forth, it feels really, really cluttered. I couldn't make them too complicated, otherwise the whole thing would feel really mishmashed. So that was very important. So there, for your bomb drop, I brought in some synths, which would feel a bit grittier. You know, you have a bomb breach, and then you're filled with basically like riot police almost. So I wanted that to feel a little bit grittier, and leave the sort of the lighter note down to the visuals. And that was done by adding these synths here. So we have an ARP, we've got a big old bass and some pulses. It's very, very, you know, it's pretty standard action hybrid elements to add on top of everything, and they don't really stand out in the mix. They're just there to add a bit of bite. If I just play that through. And you can see there as well that we have this massive bomb impact. And if I actually take out the trailer audio itself for a second, you'll notice that I have drums in here, but they're just ramping up on a drum kit instead of like the main taikos and everything. And I don't hit the bomb going off because there's just no room for it in the mix. So I just ramp up, and then the impact is afterwards when we break into this new room, and that's where everything comes back in. This might be too loud now, I forgot what level it was set at. That was just a little thing. We go down into the toilet, so I have like a little violin cue that brings us down with it. Just some basic like action matching. So this actually proved to be a really difficult 2 seconds of music, but the first draft that I did of this had the music slightly slowed down, and Gavin wanted it to stay at the exact same pace and not really like drop here. So to keep the sort of pace going and keep the momentum, I have one bar of 9/8, which was a little hard to make work because we are in 4/4. Doing things like 6/4, adding a 2/4, whatever like that, that's a fair bit simpler. But yeah, just maintaining a bit of pace here. So rather than doing anything melodic here, we just have some brass stabs, and the drums slightly drop out, but the pitch and everything, you know, it's all ramping up, which gives this sense of drama. So if I bring that out again, and then we come back in with a good old trailer drum smash. So yeah, this is where we come into the sewers and we change key. It is also where I start bringing in this more like sustained melodic motif that comes in, as opposed to everything being these like staccato riffs. I bring it in on some strings and yeah, a French horn section. And that's because it's going to come in. Actually, this is the only part that I added in retroactively. So I had this this line. Where is it here? Very Mission Impossible. I have that in the helicopter scene at the end where we have like maximum drama. I wrote that first, so if we add that, I've got it lined up with, yeah, these guitars here. So we've double tracked those, a lot of pitch bending, you know, played, not programmed. I think they're actually a little bit out of tune, but when you're trying to sort of add a little bit of grit, sometimes I actually quite like to do that. There's like some really over bending and it just makes them slightly stick in there. It also matches that really like cheesy sound of like ultra bending there, a little bit glam rocky. So mixing that with some big serious like Zimmer like brass sections was I thought the way to go. So yeah, moving into this sewer scene. I also felt that this part should be like really cinematic. You actually, you know, you start getting the big film shots. You know, you have the sort of over the head here, the bird's eye shot. And when we've had all this like close quarter stuff, very CCTV like, lots of corridors. So as everything opens up visually, you should try and match that with the music. This little part here with the camper van arriving, is it a camper van or is it just, no, it's just like a transit bus. With this arriving, one of the important things that Gavin wanted was to, again, not drop out. It's like a very brief, almost like a pause, but the way that we did this was we had it feel like the music was sort of coming and going. So if I just, again, I mute that, the trailer. So you can actually hear the strings sort of come and go. The drums continue because they're maintaining a lot of the momentum at this point. You might also be wondering why I don't hit mute on this, because when I do that, the video disappears. It's one of the only things about Reaper that I don't enjoy with video editing. And then after that, we're in the chopper scene, which is kind of like the climax of the trailer. Now, as you can hear, during this part, a lot of space is taken up by that siren. There's quite a lot of room taken up by that, so I needed to be aware of that when I was thinking of my ideas here. They shouldn't really clash with that for one. and just knowing that I wasn't going to have room for anything too cluttered. So, I mean, it may seem a little bit cluttered, but most of the content is in the strings here. So we just have the same melodic line, the staccato strings that have been building and building and building. Now kind of follow, we have sort of like both of the team's motifs. The most obvious one comes in, it's like ding, 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 ding. That's the exact same as one of the motifs from earlier on. We just sort of mash everything together, make it all feel like it was many parts coming to this head, basically. And so that was where like the main track ends. We wanted it to be up to the very last moment, and we just let it all ring out as the helicopter is brought down. Then it comes into this section with the reggae. I'm actually going to go to the other project because that has the pitch changes that I've done with it. That's quite loud, my apologies. Yeah, that one. So, you know, it feels like everything is breaking down with the helicopter crash, which is what we wanted to kind of match, but lightly, is the crash. But doing that on a reggae track is a little more complicated, and rather than having anything build, if we kept at the same tempo, it would not have been in time. Nothing would have synced up. So I just have the audio here from, if I mute that, we have, yeah, it was recorded after the project here. Live guitars, organ, what else is in there? A simple drum kit. It's nothing crazy at all. And then I brought it into this where I can do some tempo modulating, and I can also mess around with the pitch. I also experimented with, as the helicopter gets closer, I slightly distance the whole thing. I just soak it in some space. It's just all that sort of stuff that makes things feel off. So if I just solo that, I'll bring the video back in. Let's bring, can I even bring the audio down? There goes that. And yeah, it matches the title card, the ramp down, keeps everything in time. I also didn't want it to just start with the music on the cut. I wanted it to bring in just a way of kind of like dovetailing everything. There's no point, like, if you hard cut it, it kind of doesn't seem to like blend together. It feels like it's a completely separate piece of media to the trailer that you've just watched. So bringing it in just a little early with kind of like an anacrusis, that was the plan. And yeah, and then it ends with a little button and a hard cut. I think after that, I think it was slightly brought out for the main cut of the trailer, but there was also dialogue added afterwards, so there's a couple changes. Yeah, so I think that's about everything covered in this. It was a ton of fun to write this. I had plenty of time, but ended up getting this done quite quickly because I just had a ton of fun. It's very much like my kind of style, you know, big energetic stuff. There were a few corners cut in the actual like making of this where sometimes when you're sketching and the patches that you might use to sketch, I usually will use like ensemble patches when I'm sketching stuff, or just playing on the keyboard. And when I was doing that, I found that quite often, I never really do this in my other stuff, but so for instance, these ensemble brass patches here, they just were a bit more glued than when I actually brought things down. Like I built out the ensemble and arranged everything. I found that it was just better as a big ensemble thing. So yeah, that was a mix of the Cinesamples, the 6, the bass trombone, and that'll be the full brass. Reaper's just auto-saving. And then I think, yeah, that's the only thing that does that. Maybe done it with some strings later on. Oh yeah, and the staccato patches. So usually I would I would spread everything out across a different full section just so that I can fine-tune it. But in something as cluttered as this and to a deadline, I found that sticking to the ensemble patches was kind of the way to go for me. Yeah, they just sound a bit more glued, and I don't usually use them in the actual writing stage. So if we listen to the ensemble strings, it's missing the smoothness of the legato, and I've actually not even, if we look here, there's like a hard cut in the MIDI, like the expression data there. But once you're in everything, if I solo the strings, you probably still won't be able to hear that. No, not really. If I so yeah, unlike things that are a bit more exposed, sometimes you just need to get through and get the music in there, really. So there's a fair bit of that. That was yeah, Cinematic Studio strings. I have quite a lot of the sections in this were developed with timbre in mind solely, really. One of the things with trailers is that when you're kind of trying to add a lot of density, things can kind of start losing that crisp edge. So one of the things that I did with the strings is I added Fracture Sounds' Trails library. And they have a nice ricochet sound, and you can get one of the patches is violin and cello, and they just sort of blend up the keyboard, which is very helpful for me. But that means that it takes, and then I add a little bit of extra bite. But I find that this patch is a little smoother in the performance of it. So there are some other libraries that I have. Spitfire's alternative solo strings. That's I use that quite a lot. However, I find that some of them, they've got like a lot of the sort of scrape and a lot of the bow noise in their staccatos and spiccatos, and I just wanted more of a clean tone with a little bit of bite. And then part of the extra bite was also added by synths. A little bit of distortion. Nothing crazy there. The main focus was on the final, the helicopter scene. Adding a lot of the grit to this and trying to add something to a track that already has, a lot of instrumentation. That kind of meant, so there's a few things. So your legatos, don't have them fully match. So a lot of that was done with like your delay, having a negative delay on the MIDI, but then not having the exact same negative delay. So that was -137. That's -105, and it just keeps things feeling a bit more natural. Because a lot of these libraries will have a slight artifact in their legatos, and so you want to keep things natural by matching the way that people perform, which isn't seamlessly. So if I just solo that. And I've done the same thing on the staccatos and spiccatos. They're not fully synced up, which can, I think, sometimes risk some issues with phasing. But hopefully I've gotten away with it on this. Very little in terms of high percussion on this, which may seem surprising. Most of it was done with the transients from the drums. But one of the only things I added was Hybrid 2 have a library called Project Chaos, and I've just added some sort of clock ticky kind of sounds. Which is, again, very common in the genre. and I think it was also requested by Gavin, so they went in. I probably would have added those anyway. But at this point, the main thing is just having the drums come to a head. And actually, one of the important things to do when you're maxing out your drums for the main section, I find, is to start making them less complicated. Add a lot of the complex rhythms for your solo patches early on. So like, a lot going on there. The tabla, I've got a tabla doing lots. At this point, don't get any more complicated than that. Fill things out by just adding some depth to your ensemble patches. And I've got the drums hitting the same, almost like a I guess melodic rhythm as the rest of the instrumentation. So that that's kind of matching the melody. So if I just solo the drums, this brass patch here, the guitars, there are also strings doing it. Let me see what we've got. Yeah, these three patches here are doing it. So if I add those, you'll find that the drums are kind of like hitting the same points as the melody instead of it being overly, I guess, polyrhythmic. With like a slight ramp up towards the end, but as you can see, it's just about keeping things concise. One of the hardest things about doing trailer tracks is that there's a lot of sound design to be competing with, and yeah, building a track and building texture and depth becomes a challenge when you've already been ramping it up for the whole way. It becomes more complicated with other things. You've also got dialogue to leave pretty clean in there too, but usually you'd send that off. However, this was all for me before I sent it off to Gavin. So yeah, I think the final thing that I did on that main section was I just added the tiniest extra byte with performance samples, their Angry Brass stuff, which is fantastic. And then over to the reggae section, which I've already been over. Very simple. Basic little drum kit. I think it might be one of the Native Instruments Abbey Road ones or something, which I've gotten way more use out of than I might have thought. What is it? The project's doing its auto-saving again. Yep. Yeah, it's the Abbey Road 70s kit. And then I've just messed around a little bit with Neutron for a little bit of compression. The stereo tool, I think, that's literally just checking the phase on it, and then ozone is probably just stopping it from punching a little above its weight. On the master, slightly inadvisable, but I've got a little extra byte. I don't usually add anything to the master anymore, but mostly because I usually send off to publishers and they get it done. But OTT was given like the tiniest bit of extra byte just because trailers are very hyped, and then Ozone's done the same thing and just slightly squashed it. Again, I don't want too much range on a trailer track like this where you've got all sorts of stuff going on. It should feel pretty like set in stone, I guess. It's just glued is the approach for it. You're probably going to be balking at that, but I'm not a mastering engineer. So and I did this on headphones because I'm currently in a flat. Yeah, AKGs have saved my skin. But yeah, that's the project really. This was a load of fun to work on. I'm looking forward to the game coming out. I've worked with Gavin before with Choo Choo Charles. I'll probably go into a project, maybe like the main theme and maybe the main theme from the Halloween event. Do like a sort of comparison and show how I went from one to the other when I get to that basically. But yeah, I hope this has been somewhat insightful.